This is the Come Up Top of Your Game, a business and lifestyle podcast published twice monthly. Carmen and I have a background in finance and more. And my name is Michael, and the podcast founder and host, Carmen. Good morning, Carmen.
Good morning, Michael. How are you doing?
Just fine.
Great, great.
New for 2023. We are ready out the gate, and we're going video.
Video.
Just in time for our guest this morning, Shamari Giles. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on the Come Up Top of Your Game.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me. Very nice to meet you.
Yes. So today the topic is about no more GoFundMe, understanding the power of insurance. But I want to start back
Mhm.
because you have a background in
Yeah.
banking and lending,
Mhm.
and tell us about that. Tell us about your career, and how did you like it or not? All those years, 15 years, right?
Yes, yes. I've been in banking and finance the whole time. I started off as a teller working for, at that time, it was called Charter One. Then they became Citizens over time. So I was a teller there, worked my way up to becoming a personal banker, working for Flagstar Bank. That's the next place I went to. And then after that, transitioned into post-closing department. So I started learning all the background and what it takes to make sure that mortgage documents and those packages before the bank buys them, that everything is correct, according to applicable state and federal laws. And then after that, I wound up going into the lending department for a credit union. And then I learned all the loan side of things when it comes to consumer lending and some of it in commercial as well, too. So I've covered a lot of spectrum in terms of main financing that, the general populace explores. And if it's one thing, if I would say I took away from it, working in corporate America, is just seeing you see what really goes on. You see the facade of what you're told in public, what sounds good,
Right.
but what's really happening, how the deals are really made, when the deals are actually made compared to putting out there of the idea of quote equal opportunity, so to speak. So I think that that's one of the biggest things that I took from that is that understanding the game of finance and how it works, how a lot of people, believe it or not, even in some of our more educated sectors still have not understood basic finance. And I've watched how that lack of understanding created so many problems in their personal life, whether it be through their spouse, their relationship to their children, whether they're adults or not. I've been in scenarios where I pretty much had to counsel people on both ends, not just on the financial aspect and how to go about things in a more strategic way that's going to be an advantage to them, but also helping them be able to keep their relationship together and how to think about things in a way to work it out. So when I saw these two components still heavily being almost dismissed, in
Mhm.
today's, even though we have the internet and all this information at our fingertips, that's what put me in a position where I was like, you know what? Maybe I can help do something about this. And that's what kind of sprung my consulting career from there.
Well, it's very interesting because, of course, Carmen and I do have a background in banking and finance too. So I was really anxious to hear your take
Mhm.
after 15 years, because I have 32 years of history to think about too, and
Mhm.
some of the things were very similar. Even
Yes,
uh,
30 years with me.
yeah,
And yes, some of the
even
things,
even worked at one of the same banks that you worked at.
yeah. And
Mm.
it's you said you touched on something. When you're a banker, you're wearing so many different hats. Like you
Mhm.
said, you had to facilitate a couple and just different things. You gotta teach them, you gotta be their psychiatrist, you're their counselor.
Yeah.
You are like their personal, what you call it, fraud detector. You got to detect the fraud, you got to tell them
Mhm.
what's right from wrong, you got to
Mhm.
guide them to their loan and finance. So
Mhm.
you're doing everything. You're like wearing so many different hats.
I see
Mhm.
you have a degree in finance from Wayne State
Mhm.
University. What are you doing differently now that you have your company? And what's the name of your company?
My company is Enigma Force Consulting.
Okay,
Enigma.
Enigma.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay,
Yep.
Enigma. Okay.
Enigma,
That's
Enigma
correct.
Force Consulting. What are you doing differently now that you didn't do at those financial institutions?
Well, now because I don't have the constraints of working for a company, I'm able to just be completely honest and free with people to let them know. how
Uh-huh.
this matrix works,
Mhm.
basically. So if you ever seen the movie The Matrix, I parallel a lot of my themes or consultation after that. If you watch the movie, Morpheus was the one who was guiding Neo to help him wake up and understand the prison that he's been living in, the prison for his mind that most people are in and don't even realize. Like, something's wrong, but you can't tell what it is and you're not sure. And it's not something you really can talk about because most people are not really ready to be cognitive enough or responsible enough to have those kind of conversations. So when they come to me, I like it where it's like, I'm just here just to tell you the truth. It's up to you what you decide to do with that. And I do it in various methods tailored to that individual because everybody thinks differently. So I think that's where my basis of human behavior analysis and psychology comes in because being in this field we have to be a master of understanding people. That's the only way we can actually be able to facilitate the services that we're offering them by understanding how they think in a way that they're going to be able to receive it. So I've been able to sharpen that tool just being in banking, and this is what separates me from everybody else. I think mainly because to a degree I impose morality. In a capitalist society, morality is not imposed. But that's kind of
Right.
that's kind of the talking out of both sides of the mouth. Because if you try to move morality from it, only place it in terms of when it's trying to keep you in the box, then that's kind of the issue. So now that's part of that system of control. So I hope people understand that it's adversarial and it's predatory. Now I'm not saying like unless you're going to live off grid or something like that, then there's really no way around it. But what you can do is distance yourself as your dependence on it as much as possible if you understand how the game works and play it a particular way, knowing that it is predatory and it is adversarial. So that's what kind of separates me because most people won't do that
So that
because of the
brings
backlash.
us,
Mhm.
sorry, that brings
I'm
us
just
to
saying
our
because of backlash, but go ahead. Yep.
okay. So that brings us to our topic. Your topic is no more GoFundMe,
Mm-hmm.
understand the power of insurance. And this is
Mm-hmm.
2023. So
Mm-hmm.
tell us a little bit about why you picked that topic.
Well, because, and I'm sure if you're on any kind of social media, every time you turn around, somebody passed. More often than none, you see somebody putting up a GoFundMe just to cover burial expenses. I mean,
Hmm.
burial expenses, on average is about 8 grand. Generally, and of course with inflation, everything's going up. It's going to probably start getting more than that over time. But it's still just interesting in 2023 that we have all this financial literacy tools that's available to us. I mean, our phones are literally computers, handheld computers,
Yes.
and people are still not looking up or trying to find out what's the best way of getting ahead. And some of them are also being led astray because you got all these quote influencers out here, and they're only doing things in a way that's kind of skewed so they can be at a profit and not really actually helping people. So you're kind of taking advantage of people's ignorance. So in this case, and I wanted to read this here, and this is what makes it interesting because GoFundMe, of course, they make a lot of money based off of the transaction. But of course, and they're one of the most largest popular fundraising sites. So it says more than 125,000 memorial fundraisers are created on its site, and more than $330 million is raised every year.
Mm.
Think about that.
Wow.
Every year, this is how much money is flowing through them. The majority of funeral fundraisers are millennials who have taken the platform as well as pay for final expenses. Nearly 20% of adults aged 20 to 39 said that they have used the internet to raise money for funeral related arrangements, compared to 4% of adults age 40 and older. So it's going to show that this next generation, it's almost like they have no idea about financial tools and putting things in place. Now, granted, we all live in a black community, so we know talking about death tends to be taboo, but it's still a part of life. It has to be talked about. And one thing I got to give credit to some other ethnicities being in banking, they usually be on top of this kind of stuff. Most of them had living trust set up. They made sure that their legacy is in place so they don't have these kind of issues, or even the fact of when it comes to dividing assets after they pass, then you got, a civil war breaking out because none of these things wants to be talked about, even though what's going to happen. So when I say no gun go fund me, it's more so just talking about the fact that a lot of people don't understand the power of insurance, even just from a term. So the cost of life insurance, in this case, if we looked at a term, a recent survey for Americans' expected cost for term insurance, specifically $250,000 for, let's say, a healthy individual 30 years old. Over half the respondents estimate the policy would be greater than $500 annually, when the average cost is much more closer to around $170 for a $250,000 life term
And that's for the
policy.
year. That's an
That
annual cost.
that's for the year. That's for the year.
Wow.
So
That's affordable.
just that's if we look at how much it costs to go out to eat on a date, that's maybe cutting back on maybe 2 dates a month. Maybe, depending on how you're spending and where you're going out to eat. I mean, if you're going to Roof Chris, you can spend that 3 times over just going
Yeah.
out to eat. You know what I mean? So it's more so, why are we not still prioritizing making sure that we keep our family intact when a passing comes, on top of the mental and emotional strain that you're going to experience just dealing with the passing of a loved one, and then having to try to keep your mind straight on being able to deal with all the financial aspects on top of it, if the financial aspects aren't
Yes.
even in place. That is
Yeah.
so much.
Yes, it is.
And I just wanted to bring that up to point people like, look, there's a better way of doing things, and let's not wait until it actually happens before we start trying to figure out what to do. Getting
So-
ready. Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
No, finish saying.
Yeah, I'm saying, like, we're waiting to get ready when it's time instead of already being ready for something we know
Yes.
is coming.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. We just don't know when, but we want to be ready, and we want to have things in place when it's cheap compared to at the moment. Now it's going to cost you a little bit more because the risk is already here.
So what you're trying to get our Black people to understand, or our community to understand, that it's better to get life insurance when your child is first born, and then continue, keep growing it and making the changes as necessary as they get older.
Yes.
Is that something that you're?
Yes, I would definitely advocate for that. But let's just say, even if you're coming into this now, you're 25, 30, whatever the case is, it's still never too late to get started. And for the listeners, I want to encourage you to, seek out a financial professional that you trust, who can help guide you according to your particular situation, because everybody's situation is different. And a good financial professional can help you navigate based off your particular situation to be able to meet that need. But it is a need. It's not a want. This is something you have to do. And you got to
What
make sure you do it right.
What are some of the reasons that you've heard as to why people don't get insurance? Why do people skip by that and wait to the very last minute to go to do a GoFundMe thing, or try to get a family member to cover it and all that, take it out of their bank account to try to pay for services? What are some of the reasons you've heard over the years?
I think there's a couple things. Number one of them still comes down to the fact of, we all have different cultural issues. And again, unfortunately, in the Black community, we just don't like talking about death.
Like
Yes.
superstitious, it's like people are superstitious about it.
Yes.
If you bring it up, it's going to
Yep.
happen.
Yes. I hear that so much. Like, you're going to attract the death to me.
Right.
We're not going to do that. Don't talk about death in my house.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
That is such a true thing. Nobody wants to acknowledge that we all gonna have to go one day. And just like preparing for an auto insurance, you need to prepare for a life insurance. But people don't want to do that. They are just, it's just like the C word, cancer. You said cancer to someone and they just all freak out. Oh,
Yeah.
what do you want to talk about cancer for? Well, it is something that's out there, and it's a part of life. And we all have cancer cell in our body. It based on what you eat to develop that cancer cell. So, people don't want to talk about things that is important. And your finance insurance is a part of your finance. It's a part of your needs, as you said. We have to add it to our needs. And it's something that is needed, just like our auto insurance is needed. If we drive around with no auto insurance and get in a car accident, then we're going to be driving around with cars looking like squash robot.
You may get away without insurance for a while, but it only takes one accident.
Yes.
And you're hit,
Mhm.
and you're gonna end up having to pay out your pocket. Yeah. What do you think? And I know lending is just insurance is just part of a big financial picture.
Mhm.
What is it that people are missing about finance and money in banking, especially our community? What are we missing about that?
I think that it kind of goes back to even the last question you said, which is, for one, if we're not having the conversation, and we can't even get the information because we're already blocking it out. The second
Hmm.
thing is, for us, unfortunately, it's one of those things where because Black and brown people have been historically disenfranchised since we even got here, and that's still going on today. It's hard to value something you've never really been taught about or even having the conversations talked about. So when we value more consumerism, clothes, cars, houses, all these different things compared to intergenerational wealth, delaying gratification, trying to build something to at least create some kind of a flow of finance for ourselves compared to being heavily dependent on, let's say, being a W-2 employee. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but not looking at our skills and what we have to offer and being able to go further than that. That's kind of the issue. So we're kind of boxing ourselves in, and a lot of times because we're not willing to step out of our comfort zone, not just in doing something new, but our peers. Your peers could be your family, your friends, whoever. We don't want to look odd or be ostracized for trying to do something that goes against whatever the tradition has been amongst our peers. So we got that issue. So we're kind of close things out because we're not willing to be that pioneer. So then
That's
when you look at, I'm sorry, go ahead.
true. No, I said
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah. So when you look at this graph from I looked up for the St. Louis Federal Reserve in 2022, compared to our white counterparts, Black and brown people as a whole, the generational wealth gap for us is $957,000 less than our white counterparts. And that's
It's
in
Wow.
true.
2022.
Mm.
So we're
Yes.
$1 million behind. And there's a whole host of reasons for that, which we all know based off how this system works. But the other aspect too is that there's more tools available now, like we're talking about with insurance or different ways for us to start closing some of these wealth gaps. And we're not willing to take a look at that because it's unconventional. And I think that that's really what a lot of the issues come at. We've been brainwashed into constantly being consumers. So it's easy for us to go get a loan. We rather borrow. We rather be that slave to the lender compared to, okay, how do we become the lender? How do we at least decrease our dependence on having to borrow and paying all this interest out? How do we keep that in our own community? How do we recapture those wealth transfers? So we got to
This
start having
is
the conversations.
it's very interesting, and you're right on a lot of
Point.
these
Yeah.
issues. One of the things is I noticed while you were talking is that we usually go after right now, and we're not looking long term, long range. Nothing is planned out. Everything is based on today, and then getting through today, getting through tomorrow. And there's no long range plan about savings, about cost reductions, about insurance. Everything is so today. Um, those
Mm-hmm.
GoFundMe, people always run to it, but does it always work? And
No.
have you heard about how that works? I've never used it for anything like that before, though.
Yeah, I've never understand like
Yeah,
the
does it?
process.
So many people they run after it, but does it work?
I know there's a fee, like a 2.9% fee, and then they charge like what, 30 cents per debit and credit if you, yeah, so I understand that portion. But, how does it really work?
Okay, so essentially, and I want to piggyback off of what you said. Um, you're right. That's kind of the thing. How we just get caught up in that consumerism, and a lot of that issue in itself. When we talk about the GoFundMe as an example, a lot of us is like it's low hanging fruit. Unfortunately, we as Black people, the curse in our strength is simultaneously our curse now in 2023. We're resilient. That's why we're still here. That's why we're
Hmm.
able to get to where we're at. We've been fighting. We are a warrior race. That's a fact. Or we wouldn't
Hmm.
be here, both men and women. The
Right.
downside is because we've been in survival for so long, we're passing that into our children. That's all we know is getting through this.
We're
So
in
we can't even
survival
think about
mode.
tomorrow. We're
We're
still
still in
stuck in
survival
that.
mode.
We're
Right.
still stuck in that. So we
Wow.
can't even think long term or in longevity. We didn't have the privilege of that. We just had to hope we even live that day. So now 2023, we haven't been able to start thinking that, okay, a lot of us, we're not in its fullness a parent, a Jim Crow type situation. So
Hmm.
we have more flexibility. So then when we go by just living off the seat of our pants, GoFundMe kind of, it can be a blessing because you set up the profile for the amount of money that you're looking for. You put out a bio, a video, whatever you share on social media, so people are able to give electronically. And of course, GoFundMe takes a piece based off of the transaction, not necessarily off the actual pot. Now, as you can see, a lot of money is flowing through there. So depending on how well they market it and whoever gets a hold of that, it can work very well, but it's not guaranteed.
It doesn't
We
always
know
work.
it doesn't always work. So the issue
Mhm.
that you're running is that, let's be honest, most people, if they pass, they usually need to be buried very fairly quickly. So it's like, well, depending on how fast that's going to take place, well, usually within a couple weeks and everything that goes with that. What if you don't raise enough money in that time? So you always run that risk where, because now your get time is racing in that moment. So it's like you don't want to be in a situation like that.
So somebody in the family usually going to have to take out a loan. Somebody's going to have to pull money out of their savings account. Those are some of those last minute emergencies that could have been handled differently if years ago, if they, gotten insurance and prepared for this day.
So, Shamari, tell me, what is it that your company is doing to get our younger generation to understand insurance and want to invest in there? I mean, what is it that you're doing differently?
Well, as of right now, I'm still undergoing and creating campaigns to address that issue. But the main thing that I do, because I, for the most part, live, breathe, and eat this type of understanding, I just talk to anybody that I'm open, no matter where I'm at. I can be out shopping. It makes me no difference if I got to weigh in, and I'm able to talk to them where, like, hey, let me at least give you information. I'm not trying to sell you anything. And I think that's the biggest piece for me, is that, of course, time is money. But I think that if you get the information out there and you plant the seeds, it'll return to you one way or another. So the main
And
thing is that I just try to get people's ear, because a lot of it, people are not even getting the information. So they can't even make an informed decision because they don't even know what their options are. So in this case, somebody looks like them. Don't get me wrong, I help anybody. But of
yes,
course, my heart is more for my people, because we're the ones who are still behind the eight ball. And I got a problem with
yes,
that.
true.
So anybody who's willing to hear me out, is I get the information to go from there. And a lot of it's just word of mouth and it spreads. But in this year, I'm going to be ramping up my campaigns to try to address more of this. For example, I have a daughter, and I recently just did a talk at her school. Now, I was addressing more about personal development, but I'm going to create a plan to start trying to segue getting into the schools, start at least getting this information to the youth in their high school, because they'll be
Mhm.
going into the workforce and not too long, and start trying to go from there. So that's where I'm at the moment.
And yes, that is an important part of financial literacy. So right now, as you know, the governor did approve financial literacy program in the state of Michigan.
Mm.
So it's a good thing you're doing, and you're doing it from your heart. So I say go for it. And you have another question.
No.
Tell our audience how they can reach you in case they want to get some more information, learn more about insurance, and talk to you about what's your passion.
Very well. Well, I can be reached at, you can phone, call, or text 586 804 7097. Again, that's 586 804 7097, day or night. And I can also be reached through email by enigmaforceinc@gmail.com. So that's ENIGMAFORCEINC@gmail.com. Those are the two primary ways that I can be accessed. And I would love to hear from you, even if it's just to answer some questions. The main thing is I look for people where it's like, just keep an open mind, and I'll show you everything you need to see, even in black and white. So it's not just hearsay. You'll get all the information to know for sure what I'm telling you is true.
Well,
And
this
just
is
let me give you the info.
this is so amazing. We really wanted to start off 2023 with a blast, and what other way could we start this
I
off
know,
but
very
financial
interesting.
literacy?
And I would even like to do a follow-up, another
Yeah.
interview sometime this year, to even go more in depth uh, with you. But you are very well informed and you're passionate about it. And I see you learned a lot in 15 years in
Yes.
financial services. And I'm glad that you're putting this effort into helping people now, because it's a jungle out there with all these financial
It
services
Yeah.
is.
companies. There's so many and so many options and so many financial products now
Mm-hmm.
and ways that services are being delivered to
Mm-hmm.
people. There's so much to know. Almost like technology, it keeps changing, and there's
Mm-hmm.
more and more, and you got to find out from somebody who knows.
Mm-hmm.
So we appreciate you. Thank you, Shamari Giles, uh,
Thank
owner
you.
of Enigma Force Consulting. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for joining us on the come up top of your game. You're at the top of your game.
Yes,
Thank
you
you. I
sure are.
appreciate that.
You are definitely starting 2023 at the top of your game.
Thank you. I look
Oh,
forward to coming back. So whenever you're ready.
all right. Well, we thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thanks. You too.